And kind of
Yeah,
going back, if you still want to, talk a little bit about this, but the
yeah,
ISPO
yeah.
process, right? I'm not sure if you were there. Well, it sounds like you were. If you were here at Bitcoin at $1,000, you were definitely here during the ICO craze in 2017,
Oh
2018
yes.
on Ethereum, right? And look how that ended up for a lot of people, right? Was with SEC securities issues, right? In terms of how things were administered and how tokens were distributed. So again, the fact that Cardano was able to learn and iterate off of that to provide people with a mechanism to essentially participate and earn tokens without necessarily locking up or giving away their keys, right, is like a win-win. Not only can you participate in the early stage of these projects, but you don't also have to turn over your actual keys or your actual assets, because the way that staking works on Cardano is that you keep control of your assets. All you're doing is giving away your staking key to whoever is actually, using it for the ISPO. So just another piece I wanted to add there.
No, I like that. And it just reminds me, like, whenever I go to the bank, because I'm from Canada, right? I literally had a card that wasn't working, like a debit card,
Mm.
and I had to go into the bank, get a new card, and I had to wait because it was over the weekend. At least with cryptos, you can own your own assets, and that's just one area. Do you think the everyday person will be using more crypto within even 2, 3 years, or do you think it's going to take more time? Or do you think it's already happening? What are your thoughts? Like, do you think that, like, what I notice is when I start talking about crypto, people just start backing off and they're kind of scared or they think I'm crazy. They don't get it. And if you do try to explain to them, then they're like, oh, maybe he does know what's going on, but I have no idea what he's talking about. So what are your
Mm.
thoughts? Like, do you think crypto is mainstream now, or do you think we're not there yet? Because I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're even close yet.
I agree with you to an extent. I think we are on the cusp of adoption. Now, granted, think about how the internet works right now, right? Right now, you and I are literally having a conversation hundreds of miles away, if not thousands of miles away. And to us, it
Yeah.
feels instant. It really feels like you're literally right in front of me, right? And there are so many layers here at work that you and I don't understand. And it's not to say that you're not smart or that I'm not smart, right? But I don't need to necessarily understand how the sausage is made to be able to consume it, right? And so the same thing with the internet. I don't necessarily have to know about, the TCP/IP layers and how, the software and the hardware meshes together. I just need to know, okay, hey, there are other platforms, right, that utilize the internet that allow for you and I to communicate in this sense. So I think we're going to see the same thing eventually come with crypto. And like we talked about earlier, Meld, I think is going to be one of those projects that allows that to happen. But what I think is going to happen is people are going to be interacting with crypto on a day-to-day basis without even realizing it, right? So things, for example, like driver's licenses, right? I recently had to go update my driver's license and had to get like this real ID, which is what they call it in the US. It's like this driver's license with the star at the top right-hand corner that allows you to like
Okay.
travel at all of these airports without necessarily having to carry a passport anymore, right? That said, I'm looking at all these different systems that we have, right? And crypto, I think, is going to be a system for digital identities, right? So in the future, I would assume that I'd be able to get some kind of identity for myself, and that'll be tied to an NFT. What blockchain that lives on, that's beyond me, right? But I think that the
Yeah.
technology is here to stay, and the real world use cases, right, are there's just so many of them. Owning your own rights when it comes to music, right? Deeds for houses to make sure that there's no tampering of documents and sale history, right? These are just very, very basics. And again, I think that over the course of time, the use cases are going to grow. And again, this is just the beginning. So I think that people will inevitably have to adopt crypto. And whether or not they know that whatever platforms they're using are using a crypto backend or a blockchain or cryptography backend, doesn't necessarily matter, right? But because we're early adopters, we are making the sausage. We are setting up the TCP/IP layers, right? We're the ones doing all this right now. But I promise you, whenever we get the common people that are not necessarily raising their eyebrow at crypto right now to jump in, they're going to be interacting with crypto without even knowing about it.
I like that. And I agree with that too. There's so many ways of going about it, right? But I did do a video recently talking about the differences between layer ones and twos, right? So you have, for example, the Lightning Network, which runs on top of Bitcoin, and you have all these side chains, right? So the idea is like the layer ones are the plumbing, in the foundation or whatever you will. Layer twos are going to be what people actually use, like a phone. I don't know how the internet works, but I know how YouTube works. And then beyond YouTube, there might be something else. Do you think, though, that, for example, and this is just speculation, do you think that Cardano and Ethereum will be the plumbing that runs these layer twos and threes that people use? How far do you think that goes? You know what I mean? Do you think it's going to be until like the layer sixes? Because we don't know what's possible, but maybe we don't need that. Like, there, you know what I mean? There's so much to
Yeah,
think about. What
that's
are
a
your thoughts? Do you think we're almost there? Or do you think we still need to make it easier, so to speak? Because that's what it does. It makes that gap easier for people to use.
yeah, and I agree with that. So I think that's a tough one to answer. We'll definitely need whatever the layer ones are, right? So I think that in the long term, we'll still see Ethereum. We're still going to see Cardano. We're still going to see Bitcoin, and they all have their own strengths, right? It's almost like a tool set at the house. If you're doing woodworking, you can't necessarily use a hammer to cut a piece of wood, right? You need a saw.
No.
And so Cardano might be the saw, right? Ethereum might be the hammer, and Bitcoin might be the ruler, whatever the case is, right? So I think that everybody has their own place. And as long as the blockchains themselves know, okay, hey, we're good at throughput, we can process things to finality very quickly, or, we can do things in a secure fashion, right? I.e. Cardano, then they just kind of have to just stay in their lane. Now, in terms of how many layers we can expect, that's a tough one to answer, man, because I find that, like you said, as we have more layers, we get a lot more abstraction. And as we get a lot more abstraction, we get things that are done a little bit more easily, right? Like you take a look at traditional Web 2 coding back in the day when people were, doing everything and writing out the HTML code compared to what we have now with all these different frameworks, right? JavaScript,
Mm.
TypeScript, all these different things that essentially abstract the very simple basics, right? It makes life easier. So hopefully we have, additional layers running on top of these solid protocols already. But in terms of how many, man, I think that's very hard to predict. But the more, hopefully the better. And again, hopefully it all does the same thing, which is drive adoption to crypto.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And I think about how big the internet is because at least me personally, I remember I used to have a flip phone. I didn't have the smartphone. I remember when we had the first digital cameras, but all that being said, I'm thinking about the internet now. Like I have a fiber optic plugged in my computer now talking to you. But how many of us think about at the bottom of oceans the internet cables that are running through, in giving the internet access and data to the world, right? How much more valuable do you think that is today compared to like 20 years ago, right? So now you can kind of own a piece of that. And I don't think we really know what that means. I don't know if I'm making sense there, but like we don't really know what it means to own an all purpose based decentralized blockchain, right? Like what's going to happen if you own that?
I personally think investing in the layer ones right now, or as some people call them, layer zero, you know, potato,
Yeah, that's
potato,
that's
whatever.
that's yeah. We should
I
call
think
them layer
invest,
zero.
well, investing in the foundation, right? I think everybody understands that. I think investing in the foundation is what's going to be key. Now, granted, like you mentioned earlier, we can have completely different ecosystems built on top of Cardano, completely different ecosystems built on top of Ethereum, etc. And then those ecosystems can have additional ecosystems built there. But if you remove the base foundation, none of those other ecosystems will function, right? So that's my kind of thesis right there initially as to why I continue to invest in a lot of these base foundations or these base layers. But I definitely think that the opportunity, right, lies at the forefront of the technology. So, for example, you could have invested back in MySpace, which was one of the first social media platforms, right? But you look at
Yeah.
MySpace now, and MySpace is, it's kind of forgotten about. A lot of people don't even understand what MySpace is now. And so staying at the very forefront, developing is key. We need that. But at the very bottom of that, right? MySpace, Instagram, Facebook, all these things need the internet to run. So again, I think investing at that very bottom layer is a very safe bet. Again, not making this financial advice, but just again, my personal thesis as to what I'm investing in.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing I wanted to hit on because
Hmm.
we were talking about NFTs slightly. I think NFTs personally that is the one area of the world, because music is so big. I listen on the radio, you have Spotify, that's a whole other topic, but music is the one place that you could solve the problem of people not ripping off artists and actually owning something and having, like, NFTs are so valuable in the audio space. Do you agree with that? Like, I think that the moment Apple starts, or whoever it is, if these record companies start minting NFTs, that blockchain, whatever blockchain it's going to be on, is going to go nuts. Because I remember LimeWire. I remember when you could first download music, and the idea of actually adding royalties to it is amazing too, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that? How big do you think music NFTs are going to be big? Because I think it's going to be, like, people will be abashed. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I share the same sentiment. I think NFTs, as it pertains to music, really again puts the ownership back into the creator's hands, right? So I think it'll even apply to like content like what you and I are creating right now, YouTube videos, right? If you and I put the time and the effort to create a video, go back in and edit it, and we can sell it or have it be viewed as an NFT to where if anybody else shares it, we're then getting a part of the royalties if it's monetized, right? It only makes sense. So again, I think we're at the very bottom here. And for music, it's definitely going to revolutionize the space. And so I do want to mention the Noom project, which is a decentralized music platform. They've got a few artists right now, but they're essentially working through that process, right? Like they're going to be essentially minting NFTs. There's also the Six City platform, the Six City project, right? Which they've already released music as NFTs on Cardano. Now, whether or not they're earning royalties off of that, I'm not necessarily sure. But the fact that we're now able to put the power back in people's hands through the use of that, I think is huge. So I'm very bullish on NFTs again. That's just another use case. But yeah, I think it's got a long way to go. And once these giants understand that, which are Spotify, you know, all these other platforms, iTunes, they're either going to have to get with it or get left behind. So I could see Apple, Spotify, all these other platforms adopting NFTs, and then essentially giving the creators what they deserve in terms of royalties.